Welcome to today's episode in the Growth Hacking Culture podcast, where we are tackling one of the most pressing challenges in the corporate world, scaling innovation despite having resources. This gap between innovation potential and actual scale impact is what we will be exploring today. A key reason behind this struggle is highlighted in Frank Mate's book, Now and New: How Companies Can Use Their Capabilities for Scaling Innovation and Generating New Growth. Is the inherent tension between a company's existing operations, what Frank calls the now, and the development of new disruptive businesses, the new. Overcoming this one company, two systems challenge is crucial for sustainable growth, and it requires a nuanced approach that goes beyond just the traditional innovation frameworks. To guide us through this complex landscape, we have a distinguished guest, and is also the author of that book, Frank Mates. Frank is a recognized expert in aligning now and the new for corporate new business building. With decades of experience in innovation and business building, he has advised numerous leading companies on how to bridge the gap between initial innovation and scalable business impact. His lean scale-up approach provides a practical roadmap for companies seeking to transform themselves into true transformation engines. And what is funny, I highlighted the lean scale-up approach, but his approach goes beyond that. And we will discuss about it. In this episode, we are going to discuss the themes from Frank's book, focusing on how companies can foster startup-like autonomy within the corporate structure, the critical role of talent management in scaling innovation, and strategies for overcoming the one company, two system barrier. So let's get started. Frank, I'm so happy to have you here today.
Thanks for having me, Ivan.
Listen, I wanted to understand. So writing a book like yours is not an easy exercise. People think that now with ChatGPT, we can create books left, right, and center. But having originality and the way of explaining with valid examples innovation is tough. How did you come up with that idea?
Yeah, see, first of all, I'm not want to mention it a dozen times, but it's not just Frank, Ivan. It's Frank plus more than 100 experts. Because the topic that we're talking about that you mentioned in the introduction, this is still an area where there's not a best practice. There are emerging practices, good practices, examples of what works and examples of what does not work. So my kind of ambition, if you like, was to consolidate the good things out there about the ambition that you mentioned. And so, speaking about how a book comes to life is one thing, and discussing how a book with more than 100 co-authors comes to life is a second issue. But maybe I just give me two minutes to recapitulate. So I started in the 2010s. I was working in a space that they call today open innovation, right? Companies co-innovating at that time more with universities, with other companies. These days it's about startups. And then in some 7-8 years ago, within a couple of weeks, Ivan, my clients, the Philips, the BPs, the Bosch, the INGs, the Telefonicas of the world, they said, Frank, all good and fine, but the work that we're doing in the early stages of innovation, that's not the real problem. So that made me curious, and I asked them, what is the real problem? And they said it's the business impact that you can measure on new revenues, right? But you can also measure, if we think about a company like BP moving from an oil and gas company to an energy company, it's also transformation, right? So all these innovations should generate a part of the transformation agenda. And so at that time, 7-8 years ago, there was nothing out there. How do you do that? How do you combine what I call today the now and the new, right? To use the assets and the capabilities, the decades of experience to create something new, something meaningful. And over time, I wrote 3 books on that subject, Now and New being the last one. And the ambition is to basically come up with a kind of thinking model, a framework, if you will, so that companies can solve that challenge systematically by using that kind of thinking process in here. If you're interested, how do you write a book with more than 100 people? What does not work, Ivan, is grassroots democracy, right? So if you ask 100 people, what do you think about it? The process is more saying semi-directed. So I came up with the general framework, the skeleton, if you will, and then we started to chew on the bones, saying, okay, this one doesn't fit here, it fits there, and we forgot about this one, and this is super important, and this is where that body of knowledge emerged.
Then I have noticed that
Yeah,
I remember back in the days with General Electrics.
yeah,
So they had a transformation model back that they started in the 2000, if I remember correctly. And when things are going well in a company, shareholders appreciate it. Ah, there is a transformation, they're getting
yeah,
ready for the future, they're moving
yeah,
into services and whatever. But when the business, the core business is not going well,
yeah,
shareholders are going to slap you to death, and they're going to tell you, you are
yeah,
investing too much, you are using too many resources.
exactly.
It's exactly the point of
Yes,
your book now
yes,
and new,
yeah,
because the balance, despite having back in the 2000, they still had the Jack
yeah,
Welch,
yeah, 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 yeah.
correctly. He was, they got slapped big time. So for you, what have you identified as the core reason behind this struggle be, between the now and the new? And is there a way to solve that problem?
Yes, I think it is, and the 100 people plus people that co-wrote this book with me think there is a way. So the core reason, Ivan, in my view, is that every company has two systems under one roof that play out on different points of the timeline, but these systems are not compatible. They do not work together. But the problem if you want to make your company future-proof, that means if you want to win the now, create the margins that keep those shareholders happy, and be an attractive employer and all these things, while at the same time creating the new, you must make these two incompatible systems will make work together. And it turns out you need to find a system solution for solving that system problem. And it needs to be a system solution that is super actionable, right? Because 99% of the people work in that now system, right? The ones they do the selling, the other guys doing the procurement, and the financial controllers and the HR folks, etc. They do their stuff, right? The day-to-day business, if you will, right? And they do not have the bandwidth, and they should not have the bandwidth to think beyond core, right? Because they also need to have a specific mindset, and you need to move in a specific way, build, test, measure, learn, repeat, etc., to find your way through all the unknowns and the uncertainties. So making these two systems work together, that is the challenge. And should I go deeper in that, or
I have a question, if you
okay,
don't mind.
please.
You are mentioning system solution, but I have the impression
Yes.
that when you say system, we are not talking about processes. We are talking about organizational structure, type of people, and maybe some other things. Tell me more about what do you understand by system solution?
Okay, so when we search for that framework that could, with the ambition to put every company in a position that it can design its own now a new interface, depending on the industry that it's in, depending on the mission and the vision that this company has, and the position in the market, etc. So it's quite universal. So we started off with tons of factors that need to be considered, but obviously this is not actionable. But what we discovered in many discussions along the way even is it all boils down to three key elements that you need to put in place to build a bridge between the now and the new, right? Three pillars that this bridge needs to have. The first one actually is about processes. You need to think from the very beginning, where should we look for innovation so that it fits the company, What are we not going to do because it generates sales channels, conflicts, etc.? How do you collect proof points for that company, the validation, as the experts say? How do you align the now and the new for operational scaling up? Then the scaling up itself, and then what comes afterwards. Could be a reintegration, could be a new company that's part of the company group. And then you have a lot of issues around that process, like should we scale up internally or externally? So, but that's just one part. The second part is leadership. Because at the end of the day, Ivan, innovation is about making tough decisions. What has priority, right? In a given macroeconomic environment, should we focus on the core business? Should we invest 10 million into sales and marketing with a kind of return on investment that you can predict? Or should we take these 10 million and invest it into future businesses, right? So having senior management putting their skin into the game. We are those 100 people. When I speak about we, that's not my company, but the co-authors. We were going far beyond saying we need support. Now we need to have skin in the game, right? Meaning, senior management associates with the success of these transformational activities, finding the right structure, governance, and then one point that's very dear to my heart: establishing a one company mindset. It's not the one company with decades of history in the back and some future innovation theater. No, it's one company. That's the leadership dimension. And the third dimension is people and culture. No idea becomes a 50, 100, 200 million dollar business by itself. Right? It's about the people, the teams that generate that. So one of the things is who should be on those teams? How do you create a kind of entrepreneurial freedom? You mentioned startup-like autonomy, a term that I like very much within that corporate context. How do you envision a growth culture that these people and the people that they work with from the existing business in the interface need to have, etc. So it's about the process, it's about the leadership, and it's about the people and the culture that make up that system.
You know, you got my attention with this sentence, this quote that you have used, skin in the game.
Yes.
I'm a fan of this author, Nicholas Taleb,
Yeah.
who wrote the book called
Yes. Credits to him, yes.
This guy is crazy, but I love him. And you made me also think about the times in my corporate life where I remember that an American company where I was working started the process of transformation. And the first pick, it was to start with a lean startup approach. And after 2 years of investment, everybody, all leadership guys, getting the Eric Ries book, having some training about the lean startup methodology, nothing really happened. There was a huge waste of more than 50 million in training and development for the whole organization. Nothing really happened. And because some of the things that you have mentioned about the three pillars, so there was a process, but leadership and culture wasn't there. We were not allowed to have our curiosity days. We were not allowed to investigate, to work on our own growth in order to provide this growth to the company. Leadership was still behaving in the old ways, prioritizing their own agendas instead of having something where everybody contributes. So there was a lot of things that were missing, and especially this part that I remember having seen the CEO, how do you say, scorecard, or like, how is he going to be judged at the end of the year? Year number 2 after the launch of this transformation program, there was still nothing regarding the transformation where there was a weight. It was only about results. So the old mindset reflected in his performance. So nothing regarding, so it was like this game was only for employees, staff, and not for him, or maybe not even for his direct team. That I didn't know, but I saw the CEO uh, objectives of the year for the second year of the transformation group. So skin in the game, I think it is always underrated. It's almost like we are too scared because we don't know the future if this is going to work. So I'm not going to put it because it depends in 1 million factors, right?
Definitely, you're touching on at least two super important success critical issues. Maybe we start with the lean startup. I mean, that's part of the problem, Ivan. The lean startup was never designed for the corporate context. That's not what Frank is telling us. That's what the father of the lean startup movement, Steve Blank, professor at Berkeley University, tells us. It was designed for greenfield startups that are trying to find products that people love and then build a business on it. But that's not how corporates tick. For corporates, the corporates think in terms of businesses, meaning top lines, margins, etc. Products are there because you need to generate the margins, right? But it's not about predominantly about the products. So one of the what I see even in many companies, the frameworks, the processes that they are designing, they are based on the lean startup, means they are based on a thinking that is not appropriate for corporates, right? So what we did, again, we being, I won't repeat it again, co-authors plus myself, is to say, well, there's some good things about the lean startup. That kind of customer centricity, that kind of agile progress, etc. We need to safeguard this, but we need to think broader, meaning the corporate context. And we also need to think longer. It's not just coming up with some great idea. It's all about the scaling, right? As I like to say, if you're not succeeding in scaling up your innovation concept, all that you did before is just a costly hobby. Right? So we need to extend, make it bigger, make longer the lean startup. And the second super important point that you made is about the senior managers. I mean, case in point, Ivan, there are so few companies that have shared goals between the now and the new, right? They have tons of metrics for the day-to-day business, right? Up to the third decimal, right? Batteries of KPIs that are linked to. And they've got some metrics for the new, right? For like number of ideas or number of businesses that should be scaled, or maybe even revenues coming from new businesses, that kind of stuff. But what you seldom find is companies that say, well, here are some goals that are relevant for now and new at the same time. Basically, you chinch together the ambitions of now and new. Now, the problem is not so much at the senior management level, as I observe it even, it's at the middle managers level, right? Because this top management typically says innovation is super important. Everybody does it, we need to do it as well, and there are 2 pages in the annual report where we would like to speak about what we're doing here, right? So they also give away some money for funding the innovation center, and there's a small number of people working in the innovation space. That's not a problem. But when you go down, when these innovators should work together with the functional experts, or should access customers, or should get a space in the points of sale, right? All these corporate assets and capabilities. The managers that are overlooking these assets, they do not have any goal that relates to the new. So why should they take any personal risk and inconvenience and risk that their performance figures going down? No, we need to make sure that there are goals that also connect the nows and the new, and senior managers putting their skin in the game, as we said, to make these happen. Fully with you.
I know that there is pages and pages in your book about the topic, but I wanted to ask you, so to make it easy for me to really get it,
Mhm.
how would it look, a goal that combines the new and the now? Let's imagine that I'm a senior manager. I
Mhm.
don't know, in the area of operations. How how would it look? And do you have an example?
Yeah, two examples. Maybe we take one from the consumer fast-moving consumer goods, from the beverage industry, and one from a more B2B setting. So one beverage company that I worked with had defined as a goals connecting the existing business, right, where they ship their beverages to supermarkets and beverage stores, etc. And they had the innovators working on some in-house kind of devices where you can tap your beer, your fresh beer then, right? Number of customers, or number of sales outlets or drinking outlets, if you define this, right, it's relevant for the now as well as for the new, right? Or if we go into a B2B setting, where one company was aiming for X as a service business model, right? It's not just the machinery, but you can purchase or rent machinery by the hour, right? And everything included, these kind of business models, right? Again, you can define number of customers as outlets, because some of these new customers would not be accessible for the now, right? The customers will simply be not willing to spend huge investments for these machinery. But if you provide it by the hour, you can extend the number of customers in here, plus maybe even shares of wallet, these kind of goals that you can establish there. But only if you define them at a high level and work them into the goal system of now, meaning in particular to the middle managers that sit on these corporate assets and capabilities, that should become the basis or the reason why for a new business, then you've got a chance to create a win-win alignment.
Hmm. Frank, does it still work, this methodology of scaling down from corporate goals to department goals to individual goals? Or people, when they are thinking about the scaling up innovation, they should think more into the OKR approach rather than this goal that looks a little bit 80s, 70s, or whatever?
I'm with you and fully being aware that you're driving the agenda. So let's agree on the O's, right? Should be an O, right? Without going into specific details, yeah, Ivan, the point is there has to be a reason why these middle managers from now engage for making the new happen. Right, and just the message from the top, innovation is super important, and we need to be innovative, etc. It doesn't pull it off, because at the end, not because these people are stupid. It's so important to understand that it's a system problem. These 99% of people, middle managers, staff functions, functional experts, etc., are working in a system that is built on productivity, predictability, that is built on risk aversity, etc. These kind of things, and they behave accordingly. It's not because they're stupid, but because the system tells you to behave in a certain way.
Time to rechange this system. You mentioned one part of the pillar that is about the culture
Yep.
itself, and we have already mentioned the fact that the one of the aims of corporation, and something that you have highlighted in your book, is to have this startup like autonomy
Yes.
for innovation teams. But again, when we are talking about people, it's very difficult so that they understand where is the balance between the need for this autonomy versus this need of corporate to have certain level of alignment and control, because they're putting money, they're throwing money,
Yes.
and you are part of the chosen ones to drive this innovation. So how can corporates balance this need for autonomy?
Yep. First of all, I mean that system view gives you an essential idea on how to look at the situation. We have two systems that are designed for two different purposes. So let's look at the one system, the now system, right? 99% of staff. Its mission is to repeat the past success recipe, right? That's why they create processes. That's why they induce short-term thinking to see that the processes work and the output is expected, etc., right? And it's all about processes and it's all about delivery. So here comes an interesting thesis, Ivan. It's not about shaping or redesigning corporate culture, but it is about designing the interface where the now and the new meet. Let me give you three figures that I collected in my career. 4%, 6%, 12%. I will come to that in a second, right? So we're not talking about 100%. These figures, these percentages represent the number of people, percentage of staff that should be able to think in both ways, ambidextrous, if you will. They should be able to translate the new into the process logic, into the industrial logic of the now. Because at the end of the day, right, the new that you're building should be a big business, should run with processes and being risk averse and everything that you ask from today's business, right? And the 4%, that's a car manufacturer, 6% is a bank, and 12% is a telco. So I think with these three data points, one could come up with the thesis that the more digital your industry is, the higher the percentage of people is. But we're talking about somewhere between, say, 4 and 12% of staff that you need to make that link, the bridge, meaning people-wise bridge between the now and the new. And these people need to be empowered. So one thing of that startup like Autonomy is to have a team, an entrepreneurial team that is working full time, burning the midnight oil for that new stuff that they're building, right? And they are able to make what Jeff Bezos from Amazon called two-way door decisions. So they can run like crazy and take decisions that are reversible, right? And if they find out 6 months down the road, oh, it was the wrong decision, well, they go back and start new, right? But it's not about the irreversible decisions in here. That's all good and fine, right? But you also need to have the counterparts in the existing business. What we're looking for are empowered, functional experts. Let's take an example. So one of the corporate startups that I worked with was building its competitive advantage on global sourcing. So it needed to work together with the procurement function of a large Fortune 10 company worldwide. So if you want to run this, right, you need to have find clever ways to shortcut corporate procurement processes while keeping the essence, meaning traceability, compliance, and legal feasibility, etc., everything in place. To do that, you need to have a couple of procurement experts that understand what these innovators are doing and that this is not the norm. They understand the systems, the processes of the procurement part of that company and know how to bend it. And in case of doubt, since they are empowered, they do have a high-ranking manager where they can say, here's the problem, right? We need to do this, but the corporate procedures do not allow us to do it. So can we make an exception to that rule? So it's two parts, right? And it's not only the innovators that need to have some sort of autonomy, but there needs to be some connecting part in the existing organization. And here's one more thing. I call it accelerated growth. So I was working with a plastics company and they said, well, we come up with a new product line, smart products, etc., that kind of stuff, right? And providing samples to potential new customers is essential, right? Before we started to work, they could come up with 2 samples per week, but this is not scalable, right? So what we did is we reworked that product sample process so that they can shoot out now samples for every single potential new customers that they want, right? So on the corporate side, you need to have those empowered experts plus lean processes that then work together with these startup-like autonomous teams inside the corporate.
Does it mean that we need a different type of people that the ones that you have in a corporation that is dealing with with it now, that when you go into the scale mode, you need to have a different type of profiles, maybe even change CEO, maybe even change the senior management team. What is your take about that? Do we need this change, people out and new people in?
Well, could be. Depends on obviously on a specific situation, but maybe two thoughts on that, Ivan. First of all, if we look at staff, right? Keeping in mind that only 4 to 12% need to be really ambidextrous. My experience is that when the company says we want to have those empowered functional experts, they show up, they raise their hands. So in every function you find people, that's my experience, that want to go beyond just repeating that same old boring, more or less boring routine, right? They want to have some new stuff, some new challenges in here, right? And if we provide the right environment for them, they will go the extra mile and they will nudge the now system to a certain point, right? Now, if we looked for scaling up, these are different people. I mean, I sometimes get the question, Frank, here's our innovation team. What do you think about the people? Well, my experience, Ivan, is we need to have at least 3 different types of people. The one is the discovery, very early. So where could be a meaningful idea that could become the germ cell, if you will, of a large business? These are people that are either creative strategists, so they see that customer needs are changing and AI provides new opportunities and and couldn't that be that here's a great idea? So that kind of thinking. And the second kind of persons that you need in the early stages, I call them ethnographic researchers. So they would sneak around your house, watch very closely what you do and say, hey, here's an innovation opportunity. Here's a problem that Ivan is struggling with. Let's help him, right? Then as we go on in the innovation journey, you have the validators. These are assumption hunters. They want to crack through the question marks and the unknowns with a scientific mindset. So if we do it right, validation, collecting the proof points that established managers and their boards need to really divert investments from the now business and the new business, right? This is a scientific process, it's not chaos. And then we come finally to the scalers. These are people, the entrepreneurs that love those ambiguous situations where there are no processes yet, right? They're only hints and clues what could work, right? What could be made scalable, etc. And they associate fully with the concept of that they're driving. They're burning the midnight oil, right? They go to the trade fairs, they read the magazines, they engage in customer forums, right? Because it's their world. They believe in that they can make, as Steve Jobs said, a dent in the universe, that small part of the universe. Now, if we look at the top, you asked, do we need new managers? I'm not sure if we need new managers, but I think we need managers with that one company mindset. Do I have time to tell a story about Kodak?
Please go ahead. And
Okay.
yeah, I like the story about Kodak. Please.
Okay. So many folks say, yes, we know the story about Kodak. They invented the digital camera, but were not smart enough to use this for the company, so they went bankrupt. First of all, that's only a small part of the Kodak story. They invented it. They were meticulously tracking how digital was replacing silver film photography, right? And they made digital cameras, consumer electronics. They invested into the precursor to Instagram, image sharing service called Photo. So they kind of got it right. It's simply not fair to say they didn't get it at all. What they did not get it is the paradigm shift at the consumer's level. Right, so you and I, we are looking at images behind computer screens, isn't it? Right, we are not so much caring about paper anymore, obviously, in the usual, but that's one image per year, isn't it, that we put on the shelf? Is it? So this is what Kodak didn't get at all. And the third point, the third disruption or transformation, if you will, is they were not able to assemble the troops behind that new stuff, that transformation. But here's the second part to that Kodak story, and I found it very fascinating when I wrote this book, because at the same time there was another company, same size, same industry, same challenge. Kodak went bankrupt, as we all know, and the other company, Fujifilm is the name, is now worth, remember it was the same size, 20 times more than what is left of Kodak. So what did they do? They asked themselves different questions. So Kodak asked, what should we do to remain in the silver film business? Whereas Fujifilm asked, well, we do have skills, we do have capabilities. One of them is how to manipulate silver film, but if we look very closely, it's not about the silver film. It's about the chemistry and the processes behind it. Could we use that expertise to create new businesses? And here comes the interesting part. The then CEO of Fujifilm, Shigetara Komori, he said, well, my mission is to create a second foundation for the company after the first historic foundation, and to take the company with me along this way. So he said it's on the one side, obviously, we need to understand where future value pools would be, etc. But it's equally important that we have the one company mindset, right? There will be people in the silver film business where we cannot offer a future home. There will be people that will have a future home when we build the second foundation, and there will be new people joining the company because these are the businesses that we're building. But we need to run this as one company in the transitional phase. So just one idea, one single point. He asked every one of the 1,000 most important people in the company to exchange with him personally. Meet him in lunch, meet him in discussion sessions, write him a 2-page memo. What stands in the way to make this transformation a success? So this is what I call one company mindset, and this is what I call skin in the game.
Absolutely. Frank, there is so many discussions in social media about individual self-awareness, but I have the impression that another challenge is company self-awareness. The example that you gave about the competitor of Kodak is, I mean, not so many companies are capable of understanding what is the real core business. It's not about making beer. It's not about making, I don't know, a cigarette or making a car. What are the competencies and skills that they have in order to see the world as open to explore? And that's very difficult, right? Even for crazy ass ex-McKinsey CEOs, it would be difficult.
Yeah, definitely. That's and hence defining the spaces where you look for innovation is not a straightforward process. It involves a lot of creativity. Maybe to quote another case study, being aware that the majority of your listeners comes from the US. Let's look at Amazon. And let's look at Amazon at one particular point in its corporate history. So at that time, they were 13 years old. They were a $15 billion company, and they were the champion of online commerce at that time, predominantly in media like books, CDs, and DVDs, and movies, etc., right? Plus some other stuff in here. And the year is 2007. This is the year when the iPhone came out, right? And Jeff Bezos said, well, it's very clear that media will go digital, right? We just spoke about Kodak and Fujifilm. The decline of silver film began 2000, right? And within 10 years, there was only 10% of that market left, right? Music on CDs peaked in 2005, etc. So it was crystal clear for Jeff Bezos that media will go digital, and that obviously would affect a online retailer like Amazon at that case. So he said, well, we either drive this development or we are a passerby and someone else would drive digital media. So let's build the devices that we need for digital media. He made the decision to come up with the first Kindle. And out of that Kindle, the whole digital media business of Amazon grew, which today, if you do some triangulation, is some $70 billion per year, right? But the crucial point is, Jeff Bezos, when looking at it, so here's the online retailer, and now this online retailer says, we want to build devices, ship devices. We want to integrate them with digital books, right? We want to make it super easy for the customers. We don't know how to price them. We don't know how the publishing houses will treat. Tons of questions and uncertainties. And Jeff Bezos said, well, if we just look at what we know, what we mastered, the skills, right, we will be left in the corner where we are right now. If we want to enter that digital media business and make a success then, we need to have new capabilities. So how do you design the hardware of these devices? How do you market consumer electronics, right? Own consumer electronics, how do you tie together the front end, the user experience with all the synchronization of books that we have on your iPhone and on your iPad and your desktop, etc., that kind of stuff. So it's also, and that makes it very hard even, I'm fully with you, is to say, well, if we just stick to what we have, we will not make it, right? We will need to envision a future business and then ask ourselves, how many of these capabilities do we already have? And how can we acquire the ones that we do not yet have?
This is quite powerful as a message. And today there is, let's say, according to the some research, 70% of companies have started any type of transformation regarding the use of artificial intelligence. And I question a little bit this number because sometimes they counted the CEO opened ChatGPT. This company started. But anyways.
That's not skin in the game, right?
I mean, I observe the market and I see that there is a potential for different companies to organize themselves and create what they call proof of concept. So they take an expensive Gen AI consultant to define a proof of concept for a case. In the other side, couple of companies, but not so many, have started to say, okay, use it as much as you want, go crazy, go bananas with the use of AI. You can use it for your personal life, for doing your job or whatsoever. But it is still a minority. And then there is the big guys, the more traditional, saying, let's do a proof of concept with this case. And the proof of concept will cost 1 or 2 millions, which, by the way, I find it quite crazy when you know that the actual work put in that is a couple of days. So how do you see what is the right way to scale this type of innovation that everybody agrees that they need, but they don't know how to start? So there is two different models.
I mean, there should be a process. If we talk about more or less quote unquote classic innovation and AI-driven innovation on how to rank these initiatives. If you let 1,000 flowers bloom, right, it may only lead to chaos. I mean, for good reasons, you do have your gatekeepers in place, right? So the sales folks will tell you, well, you do not work with some unproven solutions with my customers, right? It might destroy the customer relationship. Legal might say, well, if you exchange some insights with co-innovators on some platform that is hosted in the US, we're not sure if that really fits our legal ambition and compliance requirements that we have. Um, it's hard to tell in these few minutes on a generic guideline. But what I would say is, first of all, have a close look at the various initiatives and which ones do you keep on your radar screen and which one do get some funding. And if they work out, you don't want to fall into the MVP or proof of concept trap. Right, where some folks are playing around with that, but then you do not have any kind of sponsor, funding, teams to take it forward if it has shown its value. And I mean, there are stories out there, I'm sure you're aware of that. For instance, the neobank Klarna is basically replacing the whole customer care unit with AI agents, right? So that's impressive. So it's not just some theoretical cases, but again, first of all, I would advise my clients to go agile, step by step. Also, since things are moving so fast, right? So if we want to predict the state of AI in 3 years, I wouldn't be able. I guess you would not be able as well. So let's take it step by step. But have a clear view on what the bets are, as I would say, as an innovator, right? Bets into the future. We assume that this could become big. We assume that this can really generate some savings, some efficiencies in here, and then manage them accordingly.
Frank, my last question,
Yes.
and it's about your book,
Yeah.
Now and New.
Yeah.
Who is it for? Can anyone can read it? And a human resources person, a finance person? Do I have to be very senior? Do I have to be a junior who understands a little bit innovation? Who is it for?
Yeah. So I think that what these 100 people and Frank have created is a meaningful bridge between, say, very highly strategic, abstract discussions about innovation and how to make it happen, and some very, say, concrete, actionable guides for the practitioners. So it sits in between. The ambition is to help folks drive the discussions on how to turn innovation theater into real innovation. What I'm working with together, Ivan, is senior managers from large business units, working with heads of business model incubators and accelerators, and also then heads of corporate startups or corporate scales up. So this is the target audience, right? And what they get from that book is basically the arguments, the thinking models on how to drive the alignment of now and new inside their company.
Okay. Frank, it was really wonderful to have this discussion. I think we could have go on forever.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be putting, in order to reach you out, I guess the best way is your LinkedIn profile and then your website, leanscaleup.com. I'm going to put it below this video, this recording. It was, and I'm going to put, of course, the link to your book, Now and New. Frank, thank you very much for your the wonderful time spent together.
Thank you very much for having me, Ivan. Goodbye to the audience.